What is going on, everyone? My name is Andy. Welcome back to another FPL video. In this one, I'm going to take you through my latest draft, which is absolutely stacked in midfield, but I also have a slight variation, which is much bigger at the back, which I'm very interested in this season with the attacking potential and the defensive contributions. So let's talk about it. So let's start with the defensive players. In goal, I've still got Robert Sanchez at Chelsea, who costs 5 million, and on the bench, it's a non-playing £4 million goalkeeper. I'm waiting to see whether a 4 million keeper emerges as an option before game week 1, but right now it doesn't look very likely. Robert Sanchez is not locked into my draft, but he has been in a lot of my recent drafts that I've kind of played around with. I do like backing that Chelsea defence for just 5 million. And also, I'm not someone that necessarily plans for an early wildcard. I like to set up in a way that I can delay the wildcard if needed. And when you look at Chelsea's longer term fixtures, they're actually pretty good. So the start of the season's good, as we already know. We've spoken about that with Cucurella, Cole Palmer, etc. But when you look longer term, like game week 8, Forest away, game week 9, Sunderland at home, 10 is Spurs away, not so good, but then it's Wolves at home, Burnley away, right up until game week 12. And there's lots of chat about potentially wildcarding in game week 13 because of the fixture swings. So Sanchez kind of fits the bill quite nicely. I'm open to moving down to a 4.5. I've just not struggled for 0.5 million in most situations. But if there was an attacker that I really wanted, I might drop Sanchez down to like Jose Sarr, Kelleher, Petrovic, Verbruggen or someone like that. Also, if I decide to bench boost in game week 1 and there's no 4 million keeper as an option, I'll just shift Sanchez and my 4 million keeper to two 4.5s like Kelleher and Verbruggen or someone like that. Defensively, I've got one £6 million defender in this draft. It's still Virgil van Dijk. At the time of recording, Gabriel is not featuring in pre-season for Arsenal, so I need to wait and see if he's fit. Arteta did say he should be fit for game week 1, but I need to wait and see how many minutes he gets in pre-season before committing. Van Dijk just feels like the safe 6 million. You know he's going to play, the goal threat's there, there's some defensive contributions, which most of the other premium defenders don't have. And although it's Newcastle away in 2 and Arsenal at home in 3, the fixtures outside of that are pretty good. And again, it's a longer term pick. I am, as we get closer to the deadline, tempted by a more attacking player in that position. So at 6 million, for example, it could be Cucurella. So if I change Sanchez, maybe I go for Chelsea's most attacking defender instead. They have just signed Hato from Ajax, so maybe he'll take some minutes, but Cucurella will still be first choice. And the ones that are really on my mind are Man City defenders. Like, everybody's got to be tempted by Aït-Nouri. He's so attacking. Imagine what he could do in that Man City team. But every time I think that, I keep coming back to the point, I can't guarantee he's going to play. It could be Vardiol at left back in any given match. So maybe Vardiol's the one to go for. I think with Man City, they might play a pre-season game or two before the season starts, because obviously they were at the Club World Cup. I'm going to see how they set up. And also, I want to know the fitness of some of the other centre-backs, because if all of a sudden there's a bunch of defenders that aren't fit, that pushes the minutes up for Vardiol and Aït-Nouri. So I guess what I'm saying is I'm open-minded to going for a Man City defender or Gabriel or even Cucurella. But right now it just feels safe to have Van Dijk. And because we're still close to 2 weeks out from the deadline, I'm more than happy to change my mind the closer we get. My 5.5 million defender is Milenkovic. I suspect by the time we get to the deadline, if I go for a Forest defender, I might opt for Murillo instead because he's a defensive contribution monster, and that's obviously useful with the new rules this season. But I looked at the two of them for a video that's actually coming out tomorrow, and I think they're a lot closer than maybe I've realised, because although Milenkovic is not as good for defensive contributions, he's close, and his goal threat is much better. So I am tempted just to go for him. First 6 weeks, Forest got good fixtures, just hope he scores a goal or two, and that could put him ahead of Murillo even with the defensive contributions. If I wanted to hold on to that player longer term, maybe I'd just go Murillo instead. And then defensively, I've got 4.5 million defenders. That's because I want to pump money into midfield, but I do have a draft later on where I've spent more money in defence. Van de Ven, I'm pretty sure, is going to start the season for Spurs. Burnley at home is a good fixture, and he rotates nicely with Palace. So I've gone for Richards rather than Gay. The reason for that is Richards is better for defensive contributions. So he and Van de Ven rotate nicely. And then Agbadou, again, really good for defensive contributions. And long-term Wolves fixtures are decent. So you don't need all of your defenders to be great for the first few weeks. There's some long-term planning thoughts going into this. That's why Agbadou is there. Am I set on those 3 4.5s? Absolutely not. Like Anderson at Fulham, again, good for defensive contributions. I like Lequire at 5 million, Collins at 5 million. There's lots of good 5.5s. Milenkovic could be Murillo or Tarkovsky. There's so many options. The closer we get to the deadline, the more I'll start narrowing it down. But for now, because I want to beef out in the midfield, I'm kind of just putting in some placeholders. So I like having a 6 million defender and a 5.5. And then the 4.5 is a good value. Van de Ven, not necessarily great for defensive contributions, but the fixtures are good. And although defensive contributions are important this year, so are clean sheets. And I'm hoping that Spurs will improve. But there's lots of options in defence. I think that looks fairly well balanced. So the majority of the money for this draft has gone into midfield. My 2 premium players are still Salah and Palmer. I have played around with adding Saka in addition to those 2, and also Saka instead of Palmer, and even Haaland instead of Salah. But I keep coming back to the Salah and Palmer combination. I do worry in pre-season, as much as I say that I'm open-minded to doing something different, that I can often also get fixated on certain players and have a bias towards players that I initially picked, which is what happened with Salah and Palmer. But I do think if you're only going for 2, that probably is the best combination. Like with Saka, am I underrating him a little bit? Possibly, but he might lose penalties to Gyökeres, and ultimately Chelsea's fixtures are better in the short term. So paying that extra 0.5 for Palmer makes a bit of sense. Haaland drafts versus Salah drafts aren't really that different this year because the price difference between the 2 players is so close. So in this draft, I've got Salah and a 6.5 million forward. That could be Haaland and Rodgers. So it's not that difficult to change the draft around if I decide that I want Haaland. But I just like for captaincy the Salah and Palmer combination for most of the first few weeks. And in game week 3, where Liverpool play Arsenal at home, if I really wanted to go against Salah, even though he'll still be a good option that week, Palmer plays Fulham at home, and I've got Bruno Fernandes in my draft for the first time in pre-season, and he's got Burnley at home that week. So I do have other options. So Salah and Palmer, not locked in, of course. There's still time to go until the deadline. Things could change, but I really like both of them. Bruno Fernandes, like I said, he's entered my draft for the first time in pre-season. I think most people watching these videos were expecting that at some point. I'm much less sure about him this year than I have been in previous seasons, partly because he hasn't started well for me either of the last couple, and that's obviously hurt me. But I know he's going to play, and even though he's probably going to play in a deeper role, that doesn't mean he's going to be sat as a central defensive midfielder at all times. He will still get forward. The minutes are good. He's going to be on penalties. He's good for defensive contributions as well. He's just a solid pick to start the season with. And the beauty of him is, although I keep coming back to the fact that Man United have got to play Arsenal, City and Chelsea in the first 5, the first 3 are Arsenal at home, Fulham away, Burnley at home. Now, I prefer they didn't have Arsenal, but it's not a terrible opening set of 3 fixtures for a player you know is at least somewhat consistent in FPL. So if I get past the Burnley game and I decide that actually this is no good, I want to get rid of him, I can move him to pretty much any other midfielder apart from Saka. Everyone else is cheaper, or I could distribute those funds elsewhere. I'm the kind of FPL manager that is patient with their players. So unless I get an injury or I've picked someone that's just not going to start, I will happily not make a transfer in game week 2 or 3 and hopefully get to game week 4 with a few transfers banked. And if I've got to move Fernandes around, then I will. So he is far from locked in this team, probably less so than last season, but I still quite like him at 9. And then even with him, I've got Wirtz in this draft as well. And Wirtz he's just a solid pick at 8.5 million. There's not too much more to say. He's going to play number 10 in that Liverpool team. We know that team's going to score plenty of goals. And yes, sometimes players take time to hit the ground running when they're new to the Premier League, but it doesn't always work like that. And I think the fact he's going into the best team in the league in a number 10 role, and he's one of the best players in that position in the world, there's reason to believe he could do well in FPL, and the minutes are going to be good as well. But I think if I was moving funds around in this team, one of Fernandes or Wirtz would be the first to go. I'd drop down to like a 5.5, a 6 or a 6.5 midfielder and put that money in the forward line or in defence instead. And then the 6.5 I've put in this team is Sarr. I said earlier that I've not struggled with 0.5 million, which is why I've paid 5 for Sanchez. But actually, if I had an extra 0.5, I'd probably go for Morgan Rodgers, because I really like those Aston Villa opening fixtures. But at 6.5, I really do think Sarr is great value. Now, Kudus is also a good pick at 6.5. Njai is a good pick at 6.5. Lots of options. But I think Crystal Palace's fixtures are being slightly underrated. Sarr's expected goals, expected assist data is very good. And the other thing I like about Palace, they're already consistently playing with their first choice 11 in pre-season. It also helps, I guess, that they've done really well in terms of goals and assists, but that doesn't worry me so much. The fact they're already playing their first 11 quite a lot is promising going into game week 1. And I think after Chelsea away, you've got, I think it's Forest at home in game week 2. Yeah, and then Villa away, Sunderland at home. Now, that's not a terrible opening 4 fixtures for an attacker. Then it's West Ham away is fine. Liverpool at home is a bit tougher, of course. Then Everton away, Bournemouth at home. And Sarr is pretty much nailed and often plays 90 minutes as well. So I really like him. But, you know, the temptation to go for Kudus because he's got Burnley at home in game week 1 will obviously be there. But that's a pretty solid midfield. And I could potentially upgrade Sarr to Rodgers. I think it would look great. So to be able to afford that midfield, I've had to make some sacrifices somewhere, and I've decided to do it in the forward line. So I've got 6.5 million Strand Larsen, who should be nailed at Wolves and will hopefully get penalties. He has been linked to Newcastle, interestingly, but I don't know whether that's actually going to happen. If there is speculation about his future going into game week 1, I might go for a different player. But right now, I think he's a good price at 6.5. And then I've also got Thiago at Brentford, who again, I'm hoping will be nailed on. But we need to wait and see what happens with Visser. Brentford might buy a new forward if they sell Visser, but I think Thiago's got a good chance of being first choice number 9. And again, I'm hoping that he would get penalties if Visser leaves, and at 6 million, he's good value. On the bench, it's 4.5 million Mark Guiu, who's moving to Sunderland from Chelsea. I don't know whether his minutes will actually be good, but for 4.5 million, there's not a massive amount of risk apart from the fact he might drop in price 1 or 2 times over the first kind of 8 to 10 weeks, which is a little bit of a worry, but not enough for me to not pick him. The big concern is how easily I can get up to like an Ollie Watkins or a 7.5 million forward, because Watkins I think is great to start the season because the fixtures are so good, and there's lots of 7.5 million forward options. Also, at the time of recording this, I'm recording it on Saturday morning, it's just been announced that Son is going to leave Spurs, and Solanke has been somewhat of a mainstay in most of the drafts I've done. With no Son at Spurs, who's a legend by the way, it's going to be sad to see him go. Someone else has to take penalties, and I'm pretty convinced it's going to be Solanke. The problem is, Solanke's had a bit of an injury in pre-season, and Thomas Frank said if he's not available for this game, he'll be available for the next one. Now it's like, well, he's probably not going to be available for that one, but he should be available for the next one. I need to see minutes from him. And also they've got that Super Cup game before the season starts, which in some ways I think is good because we'll see the first choice 11 or close to it. But it's only 3 days before the Premier League starts. So if Solanke's got a bit of an injury and then he plays the Super Cup, could they rest him against Burnley? Like Richarlison's getting plenty of minutes right now. So that's why I've taken him out because of the injury worry. But if he is fully fit, and obviously now Son is officially gone or going, Solanke should be on penalty. So at 7.5, I like him. And also, there's just, like I said, a ton of options at that price point. Like Visser, if he stays, good option. It means Thiago would have to come out. João Pedro, I'll be honest, I'm a little bit less sure than everyone else. I think he's being a bit overrated because of what happened at the Club World Cup. Not to say he's bad, and he probably will start game week 1. But I kind of want to back against that 54% ownership. But Chris Wood's good. And also Mateta, I think with Crystal Palace, Eze is the key to what I do, because in the midfield, I don't have Eze. I had him in my first draft. I really like him as a pick because he's first choice penalty taker and nailed on, but there's still speculation he could move to Arsenal. If that happens, I don't want him. But if he does move to Arsenal, Mateta that would then get penalties, all of a sudden I might want Mateta. So I am conscious about having a 7.5 million midfielder in there. It could be nice. And also I like Watkins. So for example, Fernandes and Strand Larsen could be Kudus and Watkins. So I could put that Watkins player in there, and if I want to drop down to a 7.5, it makes it easier to do. And if I really needed Fernandes later on, Wirtz is obviously close to him in terms of price. So there's a few ways to play around with this draft, but if I want to stack the midfield and have a decent enough defence, the sacrifices have to be in the forward line. I don't know how happy I am with that, but I keep looking at that midfield thinking it's great. So I'm going to run that draft through the My Team tool over on Fantasy Football Hub to get my team rating. Don't forget you can get yours for free by clicking the link in the description below or scanning the QR code on screen. You can actually just upload a screenshot of your draft if you've got them saved on your phone or whatever. And I'm going to upload the graphic I've just used for my video, and I just need to add a goalkeeper because obviously I blanked that out on the YouTube video. So I'm going to save that. I'm just going to click optimize so it puts in the players that should be playing for game week 1, and it comes out at 94%, which is pretty decent. Anything over 90, 91 is probably going to be decent to start the season with. And the other thing I quite like is just going through the game weeks to see how the defensive rotation holds up. And if you just click Optimize Team, it does it very quickly. So Richards, Milenkovic, Virgil van Dijk would play in game week 2, game week 3. If I just do that again, I've got Agbadou against Everton at home, Milenkovic against West Ham at home, and then Van Dijk against Arsenal at home. But if I wanted to play Van de Ven against Bournemouth, especially if Spurs' defence is looking good, I could. Game week 4, just click Optimize Team again. Van Dijk against Burnley away, Richards against Sunderland at home. It's playing Milenkovic against Arsenal away, but again, Van de Ven against West Ham away or Agbadou against Newcastle away are options. So the defence is not perfect every single week, but it does cover quite nicely. Even going to game week 5, Van Dijk against Everton at home, Milenkovic Burnley away, Richards West Ham away, but I could play Agbadou instead against Leeds at home. So I think those defenders work quite nicely. If you want to get your team rating for free, link in the description below or click that QR code on screen. Let's take a look at an alternative draft. So another thing that I'm strongly considering is going big at the back. This is basically a variation on the draft I've just shown you. All I've done is downgrade Wirtz to a 5.5 million midfielder. For this particular draft, I've chosen Arias, but it could be Anderson, for example, for defensive contributions, or one of the many other 5.5s there are to pick from. And that 3 million has all been invested in defence. So instead of Agbadou, I've got Gabriel, so a second £6 million defender. Could be Aït-Nouri, could be Vardiol, could be Cucurella, could be Saliba, etc. But I've got that spot there for a 6 million defender. Instead of Van de Ven, I've got Porro, so much more attacking threat. And then instead of Richards on the bench, who is good for defensive contributions, I've got Lacroix from Palace, who's better for defensive contributions and has more goal threat as well. So 2 6 million defenders, 2 5.5s, and a 5 on the bench. That's pretty nice cover. And there will be times where I might want to play like a 4-4-2. And look, the 5.5s could be Munoz, could be Tarkowski. There's options there, right? There's price points there where I can move to other players before game week 1. So game week 1 would probably be 4-4-2. And then Arias, who I think will be nailed in that Wolves team, does have pretty good fixtures later on. Do I necessarily want to be doubled up on Wolves' attack? No, but I have got the options of playing more than the 3 defenders. Now, I think if I'd shown you this draft first, the reactions would have just been, that's terrible, it's too much money in defence. But I think by showing you the 3-5-2, which I think looks really nice, and just making one downgrade in midfield, it shows you that big at the back could be decent. Now, I do have a worry that I'm overemphasising how good defensive contributions can be and stuff like that. But if you look at the 5.5 defenders like Munoz, Porro, Milenkovic, Murillo, they're probably going to do pretty well compared to midfielders at the same price. And I feel like all I've had to do is sacrifice Wirtz. I could sacrifice Fernandes instead, and I'd have another 0.5 million to spend, but you get the idea. So 4-4-2 for game week 1. And again, running this through the My Team tool only comes out at 93% rating, but that's because I think they are underestimating Arias' minutes, and Gabriel is also not rated that high right now because of minutes. But if he's fit to start the season, that will go up. So I'm not too concerned the rating is slightly lower. But if we look at like game week 2, obviously Pedro Porro would be benched for Gabriel because he's got Leeds at home, Milenkovic Palace away, Lacroix Forest at home, Van Dijk Newcastle away. And I could just bench one of my attackers, probably Arias. So he's just there as cover. Game week 3, that's when Gabriel and Van Dijk play against each other. So Lacroix Villa away, Milenkovic West Ham at home. I could play Porro, Bournemouth at home instead of Van Dijk. If I really don't want to play Gabriel, that's where I bring in Arias. So all of a sudden I've got Arias and Strand Larsen against Everton at home. Salah and Palmer are never going to get benched. Fernandes against Burnley at home. Sarr against Villa away. And then Thiago against Sunderland away. Would I definitely bench Van Dijk and Gabriel? Not necessarily. For anyone that played last season, you'll remember how well Gabriel did early on, even with tougher fixtures because of that goal threat. But there's options there. And look, I could just completely tank the bench. So I've got like a 4.5 forward, 4 million defender and a 4.5 defender and put all my money into the team. But don't underestimate how useful it is to have bench cover, to rotate in better fixtures, but also to cover injuries and suspensions and stuff like that. Game week 4, Lacroix, Sunderland at home, Gabriel Forest at home, Milenkovic would get benched for Arsenal, Van Dijk against Burnley away, and Porro against West Ham away. So I'd probably bench maybe even Thiago against Chelsea and go 4-5-1 and play Arias and Strand Larsen against Newcastle away. I'm just thinking off the cuff here. Game week 5, Van Dijk, Everton at home. I mean, Gabriel against Man City at home, I'd probably play him. Milenkovic has got Burnley, so he would definitely come in. And then Arias and Strand Arsenal got Leeds at home, and Thiago's Fulham away. So I might even bench both Porro and Lacroix. Now, this is probably going to give me a bunch of benching headaches each week, but I think the cover is good. I'm really tempted to just go all in on defence and still have a pretty good attack. It only works if the cheap forwards do well, though. But again, even looking at this draft, I could go from Fernandes and Thiago, I've got to do the maths here, to like Solanke, so I need 1.5 over Thiago, and Fernandes at 9 could drop down to like an Eze or a Rodgers. So, I don't know. I think if I showed you this draft first, all the comments would be way too much in defence, way too much in the defence, but I think it's more viable than people realise. And then I've got another slight variation on that initial draft where there is a bit more money in defence, but not quite so much as the big at the back draft that I just talked about. So instead of downgrading Wirtz, I've downgraded Fernandes, and that is to Morgan Rodgers, which is freed up 2 million. Then I've moved Van de Ven to Porro and Richards to Munoz. So I've got 1 6 million defender in Van Dijk, but again, it could be any of them. And then 3 5.5s, Milenkovic, Porro and Munoz. And then my 4.5 long-term pick is Agbadou. And then the forward line is exactly the same. So that puts the midfield at Salah, Palmer, Wirtz, Rodgers and Sarr, which I think is pretty strong. But the defence is also very strong as well. And I think there's a lot of value at 5.5 and 5 million in defence. And I do think because of defensive contributions, that gap to the premiums like Virgil van Dijk, Gabriel, etc. has been closed a little bit. So that's what I like to do. Have a draft that I'm kind of happy with in terms of stacking the midfield or stacking the forward line, and then make slight tweaks. But I still think from that first draft, just dropping Wirtz down to a 5.5 gives you such a nice defence. And obviously Wirtz is someone I'm very rarely going to captain anyway. Like if I've got Wirtz and Salah, you know who I'm captaining every week. I don't care if Wirtz scores a brace in each of the first 4 games. If I want, or let's say the first 3 games, I'm still going to captain Salah against Burnley away. There's nothing that's going to change that. So as good as Wirtz is, you know, and I think he's good for 8.5, probably my favourite 8.5, just one downgrade and then, I don't know, that defence just looks so much better. And there is value in those defenders. Most of those 5s and 5.5s are going to be very competitive with the attackers. But again, there's still plenty of time to go until game week 1. Other options will emerge over the next week or so. And I am somewhat open-minded to changing my mind. And I could even go with this draft, for example, Wirtz down to Kudus. Then I've got 2 million to spend on my forward line. All of a sudden, that's where Solanke or Mateta or Visser comes in. Let's talk about chip strategy. So I haven't really spoken a huge amount about chip strategy during pre-season so far. I'm still hoping to do a video on it before the game week 1 deadline, but I thought I'd write down some initial thoughts as to where I'm at with my own team right now. So with the wildcard, I never really have a plan to use it early. I will use it early if I need to, but I'll set my team up for the first 6 or so game weeks and then see what happens after that. In terms of fixture swings, lots of good FPL managers and planners like Ben Krellin, Praz from the FPL Wire, James from Planet FPL have all mentioned game week 13 as a time when wildcard could be good because of fixture swings, and it does look decent. So if you look at Liverpool's fixtures, for example, from game week 13, West Ham away, Sunderland at home, Leeds away, Brighton at home, Spurs away, Wolves at home, Leeds at home. That also coincides with African Cup of Nations. So suddenly the minutes of other players are going to go up because Salah won't be an option from game week 17 onwards. Now you're still going to want Salah for Sunderland, Leeds, etc. But if you've only got Salah, you don't have a defender or whatever, like there's no Wirtz, then you're going to want 2 others for those fixtures. Like that's going to be non-negotiable at that point. So I might start the season with Van Dijk, Wirtz and Salah. I might also just start with Salah. But by game week 13, I'm going to want to triple up. Another team, by the way, if I just make this a bit smaller, is Man City. Now, I'm always very sceptical about Man City players because of minutes and stuff. But when you look at the fixtures from game week 13, it's going to be hard not to have 2 or 3. And Haaland's going to become an option. Leeds at home, Fulham away, Sunderland at home, Palace away, West Ham at home, Forest away, Sunderland away again. So game week 15 and 19, City play Sunderland both home and away. And then it gets a little bit trickier, right? But for that little period, you're going to want City players. So that's potentially an option. But also Arsenal, right? I'm not planning necessarily to start with Gyökeres or Saka, maybe one defender. If you look at their fixtures in game week 7, West Ham at home, Fulham away, Palace at home, Burnley away, Sunderland away, all of a sudden I probably want 3 Arsenal players. So although I'm intended to run long term and maybe wildcard in 13, if I get to game week 7 and my season started as a disaster and I've just got the wrong picks, not necessarily that I'm doing badly, but I've definitely got the wrong picks, and Arsenal have got a fixture swing, I might go in game week 7. So either one could work. Bench boost, I am extremely open to using it in in game week 1 just to get it out of the way. And look, I don't think the chip is as annoying as everyone makes out, but I do think doing it in game week 1 is so beneficial because you have unlimited transfers. Basically, Sanchez and my 4 million keeper will become 2 4.5s. That's easy. What I'm really waiting for over the next week or so is whether we get a 5.5 million forward that's an option. I think Beto will start the season, first choice for Everton, but I don't know whether that's guaranteed. That's my worry. So if we get a 5.5 million forward, all of a sudden I could have like Rodon from Leeds, Everton at home, a 5.5 forward, and maybe another 4.5 million defender, plus my 4.5 goalie. Or if a 4 million goalkeeper becomes an option, then bench boost becomes much more likely. The problem with not using it in game week 1 is when do you use it after that? Maybe game week 2, Burnley play Sunderland, so you could go for like Lefay from Sunderland, maybe a Burnley defender, nice and cheap to fill out your bench. That's an option, possibly game week 3 as well. If you wait longer for that, there might be a week where the bench will look better, but you open yourself up to more injuries and suspensions and stuff like that to deal with. And so the longer you leave it after you have your unlimited transfers, the more issues you might have. Now, we do have a wild card and we have 5 transfers around African Cup of Nations. So I wonder, and I've not looked at this in detail yet, could I wildcard in game week 13 and then bench boost one of the weeks after that? And there's no concerns about having more money on the bench because I've got those transfers to sort it out in game week 16 from African Cup of Nations. So potentially there's an option there. The problem is I've just spoken about the fixture swings. If I want Haaland, and I'm definitely going to want Salah before he goes away because the fixtures are so good, that's a lot of money spent. You'd need a lot of enablers for the bench. And game week 14 is a midweek game week as well. So in theory, I feel like something could be done around the first wildcard and the African Cup of Nation transfers, but you just open yourself up to more things being able to go wrong because you're waiting a long time to use it. So I'm open to bench boost game week 1, but I'm waiting to see whether a couple of options become viable, basically. But again, I look at that draft I did first of all, I could just downgrade Wirtz or Fernandes or even both and just not go so strong in defence and just beef up the other bench options. Like maybe even go like in a 3-4-3, if I had Thiago, Strand Larsen and Solanke, for example, then on the bench I could have a £5 million playing midfielder. That's the problem with forwards. There's no 5 or 4.5s that are definitely going to get regular minutes. And Guiu, potentially at Sunderland, could do that. But I don't know if I'd risk it for game week 1. Would I be able to guarantee he's going to start? Not necessarily, unless new information becomes available. Triple captain, I mean, you don't really need to plan for that. There's lots of good fixtures. There's not going to be a double game week, most likely, before game week 19. So Salah, Burnley away game week 4, Sunderland at home game week 14, Leeds away game week 15, Palmer, Sunderland at home game week 9, Burnley away game week 12, Leeds away game week 15, or Haaland, Burnley at home game week 6, although I probably won't own him for that. Leeds at home game week 13. If I wildcard game week 13, I wouldn't be able to use triple captain the same week, but Sunderland at home in 15 I would. So I'm not really worried about that. I'll just figure that out later on. And then free hit, I'm struggling with when to use this. Potentially could use it in like game week 2 to cover that Arsenal fixture against Leeds at home. Could go without Fernandes and use it in game week 3. So go for like double or triple Man United in game week 3 and take out a lot of your Arsenal and Liverpool players because they're playing against each other. I don't know. The one worry I have with using it early is, let's say I've planned to use it in game week 2 and my game week 1 team was a disaster. Price changes are going to happen while my free hit is active. So players could be going up and down in price that I no longer want long term. To counter that, it's not like I'm going to take multiple hits anyway to fix those price changes. So I think an early free hit is fine, but those price changes for your original team will continue in the background. So maybe early on. I'm also just open to winging it, honestly. I know that sounds terrible. I should have this big plan in place, but I don't think there's any harm in that, just winging it later on. There might be a better option that arises after game weeks 2 or 3, but I think if I was going to plan for it, I'd use it early. Because I would set up my team in game week 1 to, you know, not need to be good for game week 2 or game week 3. Like if you went for triple Spurs, Solanke, Kudus and Porro or Van der Ven or whoever, Romero even is a good option at 5 million, then you could take them out for Man City in game week 2 and then triple up on Arsenal if you're not starting with them. So there's lots of ways to do it. I'm not fully settled, but that's just some initial thoughts. If you have enjoyed that video, make sure to give it a like and hit that subscribe button. If you want to get your team rated for free, there's a link in the description below. And I will catch you again soon.